Hi everybody, thanks for tuning into this video about how to make an effective PowerPoint using the tools that are in PowerPoint. Remember, this project is a huge part of your grade in Comms 101, and the reason for that is because it is very important that you learn to make really good PowerPoint presentations. This is something you're going to be using throughout college, so make sure you put a lot of effort into really learning well how it's done. Also remember that only a part of your grade comes from the actual nuts and bolts of creating the PowerPoint and adding in transitions and making the text animate and different things like that. The other part of your grade comes from the design of it. So 35 points for just the nuts and bolts, 15 points for making it well designed. I just want to redirect you again to this document that Professor Logging created that explains how to make good presentations in PowerPoint and how to deliver them well. If you view pages 3 through 8 of this document before you make your PowerPoint presentation, I believe it will benefit you because it'll help you think through the different things that you need to do as you create your presentation. Some of the things that you should think about for excellent design are in this document by Professor Logging. So make sure you pay close attention. Remember, that's the Visual Aid Surviving the Digital Presentation Software Jungle document. The other thing that you are going to need to use for this assignment is the description, which tells you exactly point by point what you're going to need to include to earn the points for this project. You're going to need transitions between slides, text and graphics on the slide that have a logical flow to them. That's what it means when it says it has to build. You're going to use images or clip art or both. You're going to use custom animation that makes things come into the slide a certain way at different times. This says you need to have one slide, but keep in mind, if you want all 50 points, you need to make sure your presentation is coherent and that it all ties together really well. You need to make sure your presentation is readable. That means that your text has to be a logical color and size. I really like the 10-20-30 rule, which says that you should have 10 slides in a presentation that last about 20 minutes. But the last point is really important. The text size should be about 30 points on each slide for people to be able to read it. You can go a little smaller. You don't want to go much smaller, though, because the smaller it is, the more difficult to read, especially if you're making it smaller so you can fit more of it on the slide. You're probably making an ineffective slide if you're doing that. Then also you're going to need a sentence or two in the notes section below the slide explaining what you would talk about, because remember, you're not actually presenting these to me. So you will need to explain to me what you would have talked about if you did present. And then finally, on the first slide, you need to give me a brief description of your presentation and tell me who your audience is. A presentation for 3rd or 4th graders is going to look a lot different than a presentation aimed at college students. So these are the things that you're going to need to know how to do. Let's go to PowerPoint right now, and we'll get started actually looking at how to do those things. When you open PowerPoint, you're going to see that you have a lot of options for what to make your presentation look like. Make sure you choose something that makes sense, something that's not going to be too busy and that fits the theme that you are trying to present. I'm just going to open a blank presentation for now because I can actually choose a theme later as well. Now, when you open your blank presentation, you'll notice there's a space for your title. I'm going to enter a title right away. And a subtitle. For my subtitle, I'm going to enter my name. And there are a lot of options right away as soon as you come into PowerPoint that you have across the top in the Home tab ribbon. So a lot of these options are things that you've seen before. We have all the basic text options that you've used before in Microsoft Word. That's in the font box here, and the paragraph box allows you to format that text like we've done before too. So keep in mind, like, a lot of this is the same as what you've seen. Something you may use, you also have a drawing box in the ribbon that allows you to insert different shapes and color them the right way. If that makes sense for your presentation, you might use it. My guess is, though, more than likely, you're going to probably use images instead of those auto shapes. So while this ribbon is nice, you're probably going to want to, when you want to add an image, let's say I want to add an image to my title slide, you're probably going to go to Insert, and then you want to use a picture of some kind. This Pictures option inserts pictures that are saved to your computer. You're probably going to want to use online pictures because it'll search the web for images. And for my example presentation right now, I'm just going to use a topic that I've been presenting for years and years as a high school science teacher in the past. I'm going to be making a presentation about lab safety. And for my image search, I'm going to search laboratory glassware because that'll give me some images that I could possibly use. Now, notice that a whole bunch of different images come up. Some are animated images, some are real images of actual glassware. Make sure you choose carefully, but choose consistently. So if on my front slide I include a picture of actual glassware, I'm not also going to include a cartoon image of glassware on the same slide. It would look inconsistent and ugly. I'm going to choose one of these images of glassware, and as I hover over them, notice that in the bottom left it tells me what the resolution of the image is. It says like a couple of numbers. Here's the thing, anything in the thousands is probably going to work really well for your presentation. Anything in the high hundreds would probably fit as well, but anything with a resolution in the low hundreds is probably not going to be big enough to look good in your presentation. So notice this one's only 300 pixels by 346 pixels. That's pretty small. Here's what happens if I insert this image. It's going to come up in my presentation really tiny, and then when I click and drag it to make it larger so it fills part of the screen, it gets all pixelated and gross. Do not use images that look like this. I expect that I will not see any of these in your actual presentations. Instead, though, if I go to Insert Online Pictures and I search again for laboratory glassware, and I find a larger image, maybe one that's looking at all of these. Now, I just want to point out something here too while I'm looking through here. Notice that this one has sort of a watermark at the bottom. It says it's from Shutterstock. It tells you where it's from. That's actually a copyright. Don't use images that are copyrighted like that unless you're positive that you're allowed to use it. Now, here's the cool thing about searching with Bing through Microsoft PowerPoint. Notice that right now I have it set so I'm only looking at images that are Creative Commons licensed. That's actually pretty cool because I know that even though this has this thing at the bottom that says Shutterstock and it looks like it may be copyrighted, it must be marked as Creative Commons licensed, and that means that you can use it at the very least for non-commercial purposes. So if I'm using it for education, that's fine. Make sure that you're using images that you are allowed to use as you make your presentation. Don't just grab any image off the internet. Also good practice, I'm not going to do it in my presentation. You don't have to do it in yours, but I'm just going to say good practice is below the image, and you can write it in tiny font. You don't have to use 30-point font for this, but you should give credit to the person who made the image, so write their name and also link to where the image is and the date that you were able to access that image. Now, I talked a lot about images here. I'm looking for one that's going to be large enough for me to insert. Notice that this one down here, that's not a good one. Let's see, I'm looking for one that's in the thousands. You know, I'm probably not going to find it. I'm just going to insert this one even though it's a little small. And I want to show you something kind of cool that you can do with images in Microsoft PowerPoint. Now, there's a whole lot of options that you have when working with images. Notice right after I insert my image that the Format tab is open. To reopen that tab, let's say I have my text selected and I want to open that Format tab. I just select the image and then I click on the Format tab up here and it'll take me back into where I have all these options. One of the coolest features of Microsoft PowerPoint is that it allows you to remove the background in images without using any special tools. Now, this is a limited tool. It doesn't work perfectly all the time, but it does do some really neat things to some images. It always works best if your image has a stark contrast between what's in the front and what's in the back. Now, notice that when I click that, it doesn't know what part of the image I need, so I have to click and drag the handles on the outside of this box to show it what I'm looking for. And also notice that it can't tell where the glassware is in the image. Everything that's in purple is not going to be in the final image, and anything that's in the regular initial colors is going to be in the final image. So if I click off of this right now, notice that it got rid of everything in purple, but I didn't get everything that I wanted in my image. What I could do is I go back to that remove background tool, and I could say that I want to mark some areas to keep, and then I just click and drag over the areas that are actual glassware, and I want to try to get all the edges, and I can do this for a while to get as much of it as I possibly can to make it look good. But I can get all of the actual glassware now into my image, whereas before, because the glass is clear and it looks just like the background, it phased it out. I'm just going to stop there. I'm not going to do all of this because it would take too much time. But you get the idea of how to use that really awesome tool. Some other things that you can do using the format tool at the top when you have an image selected, you can choose to put a frame around your image if you really like that idea. Make sure you choose something tasteful and meaningful. You could choose to recolor or correct your image. I suggest not doing that because they're really finicky tools, and a lot of times they don't do what you hope. However, you can play around with that and maybe you'll find something that you like. You have all these specific options right here that you can add a border or some special effects. You're not required to do any of that, but there is probably one tool up here that you're going to use, and that is the crop tool over here. I'm going to click on that, and notice what happens to the handles on the outside of my picture when I click the crop tool. They change to black rectangles or angle shapes, and what I can do with that is I can click on that and drag it and make the picture small. I can cut areas out of the picture that I don't really need. I don't want all this glassware that doesn't have the top part, so I'm just going to crop that out of my picture. And now my picture is much smaller than it originally was. When I click outside of this, now I can click and drag and manipulate the new size of picture that I want. And I can make it bigger. Looks just a little ugly when it's that big, so I'm going to make it smaller until I have it a good size that I can work with. Another cool thing that you can do with pictures is you can grab this circular arrow above it and you can click and rotate the picture if it makes sense to do so. It looks kind of odd to rotate a piece of glassware with liquid inside because the liquid rotates with it, whereas normally if you tilted it to the side, the liquid would flow a little bit, but that's okay. We'll leave this one straight up and down. All right, so now you know how to work with images. You know how to add a title slide because it comes up automatically. How do you add another slide to your presentation? Well, you're going to go to the Home tab and you're going to click on New Slide, and then it gives you all these different options for the different types of slides you can choose. Most people choose the title and content slide for their next and subsequent slides, but you maybe want to use one of these other ones. The nice thing about the title and content slide is it gives you a place to put a title and then a place to put bullet points of what you're going to be talking about. So again, if I'm teaching a science class on lab safety, I'm probably going to write laboratory safety at the top. Maybe the part of laboratory safety that I'm talking about. Maybe I'm talking specifically about glassware on this slide. And maybe underneath I'm going to mention that glassware is dangerous because it can cause, I'm going to say, potential to cause severe cuts. Glassware is also dangerous because it can contain chemical residues, and maybe it's also dangerous because hot and cold glassware look exactly the same. So you don't know if you can touch it or not. All right, so I've got these things that I want to talk about. Now I notice they're all in 28-point font. I want to make them larger, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to change it to maybe 32-point font. If I wanted to add some sub-bullet points, I could hit the Tab key underneath and it makes a sub-bullet point. And then I could type down here, so potentially cause severe cuts because it's sharp. Okay. Remember though, if you're putting in sub-bullet points along with your main points, you are probably putting too many words on your presentation, so I'm actually going to, in reality, get rid of this. You also may want to add extra spaces. If you see that a bullet point is grayed out, that means it's not actually there yet, but it will be there if you actually start to type something. Okay, let's say that I want to make this text appear in a special way instead of just all appearing at the same time. Because right now, if I go down to my presentation view and I view the slideshow list, that's by clicking this button right here. Or the other way to do that is to go to the slideshow tab and then click the from beginning or from current slide button at the top. I'm just going to view this current slideshow. Notice that everything is just right there. Nothing comes in. This slide doesn't really flow. Right now there's absolutely nothing at all special about this slide. So let's say I wanted to change that. I wanted to make this text appear a certain way. What I can do is select the text box, okay? To do that, I just click on some text and then I click the outside of the box, so I'm selecting the entire box. By the way, you could just do this to one section of text at a time by clicking on a section of text. So I want to just do the entire box. And here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to there, I'm going to go to the Animations tab. And here it gives me a whole bunch of animations that I could choose from so I can make this text appear a certain way. And in fact, there's even more animations. If I click this little down arrow here, notice that there are entrance effects that make the text come into the slide a certain way. There are emphasis effects that make the text do something while it's already on the slide. Then there are exit effects that make the text go off of the slide a certain way. And then lastly, there's these motion paths. These make the text move around on the slide a certain way. I could also apply any of these effects to images that I put on the slide. So let's say I want to add something really basic. I want my text to fly in. By the way, there's another place to choose that. If I go to More Entrance Effects, it lists all the possible entrance effects that I could use in Microsoft PowerPoint. I always encourage you to go with things that are very basic and simple. Not anything that is way too dramatic. Like bounce is probably a little too dramatic for most slides. Instead, I'm going to do something really simple like dissolve in. Very simple, nice, clean, looks good. If you have a reason for using a different one because it fits well with the theme of your slide, make sure you use the thing that fits, but also make sure that you're keeping in mind what's going to draw your audience in and not make them tune out because they're not taking you seriously. Okay, so I've got this entrance effect. I'm going to click OK. And now you know it's there because you see these little numbers. You know things are going to come in at different times. If I show this slide again, look what happens. Now I see this. If I click, I get that to dissolve in. I click again. The next thing dissolves in. So I could talk in the slide and things flow and appear as I'm talking about them. Now, what if I want to change something? Well, here's a cool thing that you need to know how to do in PowerPoint. If you click on this animation pane button at the top, it opens this window at the right that shows you the order of animations. Right now it says that I have one thing going on, and if I click this little drop-down menu, it actually shows I have 3 different things going on in this slide. I have this appearing, and then this appearing, and then this appearing. If I want to change it so like these appear automatically, I can right-click and say I wanted to start after the previous thing that occurred, and it'll just pop in automatically after the first one pops in. I can also go to Effect Options. That brings up a whole menu where I have a whole bunch of different options for things to do. So I can set different timings. I can make it slower or faster here. I can set a delay, so if it does appear automatically after the previous one, it waits for a little bit. There's all sorts of different things that you can do here. I could even choose to make the entire text box appear as one object. All of the entire thing comes in at the same time. So that's where your options are. You'll also notice that you have some options for each thing up here at the top. I can set durations. So if I want this to pop in faster than 0.5 seconds, I can make it 0.25 seconds. Just so you know, 0.5 is pretty standard. 1 second is a long time for something to pop in. 3 seconds is an extremely long time for something to pop in. Half a second is usually pretty good. So you can play around with these entrance effects, but that's where those are to make things appear at different times on your slide. Notice that I can make things appear in different orders by clicking and dragging things on this list. Now this wouldn't really make much sense to do, but if I did this, I can make the last thing appear first, Notice what I did? Again, I just dragged things around in the list in the animation pane, which I opened by clicking this up here. Okay, so you probably want things popping in. If I wanted things to pop out, there's something that's kind of tricky about Microsoft PowerPoint. And that's if I go back up to this menu up here and try to add an effect, what it's going to do is it's actually going to overwrite my initial effect. So let's say I wanted things to dissolve out. Now as I look at my list here, if it's here, I don't see it, there's no dissolve. So I'm going to go to more exit effects. I'm going to choose dissolve out. I'm going to click OK. But notice what happened. Over here in my animation pane, I don't have my entrance effects anymore. I just have my exit effects. And when I play this presentation, everything's there and it just exits. I overwrote my original effect. I'm going to undo that with Control Z. And then I'm going to show you how to correctly add a new effect. To add a new effect, you can't use this menu at the top. You have to go over here to add animation, and then you can choose the effect that you want to use. Again, notice that you have this more exit effects option, dissolve out, and then voila, notice now I have my incoming and my outgoing. So that's how you're going to do that. You can again apply those animations to images as well if you want images to pop in at a certain time. The very last thing that I'm going to show you how to do in here, I'm going to show you how to set transitions between slides. To do that, you're going to go up to this Transitions tab, and you're going to choose how you want the current slide to come in. Notice that this is the transition to the slide. So if I want my title slide to wipe in from the right, I would click on wipe, and I have some other options over here. I could change the direction that it wipes from. By the way, I also had those options when I was putting animations in for things. So let's say instead of dissolving in, I want to change dissolve in to fly in. Notice it just flies in from the bottom. I can use the effect options to change where it flies in from. Some effects have effect options, some do not. But just remember, transitions have transition options sometimes as well. So again, if I go back here and I'm selected wipe, I can make it so that it wipes from the top. And now it's going to wipe downward. I encourage you, make sure that you are consistent. If you use the wipe transition from the top, I would use the wipe transition on every single slide, and then have a reason. If you're doing it from different directions, make sure you alternate the directions in a pattern, or have a reason why you're making them do what they're doing, okay? Just make sure that you are thinking this through so that the design elements make sense for what you're doing. Okay, so hopefully that explains how to use the basics of Microsoft PowerPoint. There's a lot of options that you have for everything. Again, with these transitions, you want to make sure you don't go too complicated or weird. Some of them are just over the top bizarre. Make sure that you have a reason for using the transition and keep it simple. All right, the very last thing I want to show you, this isn't really a new feature, but it's just something that you can do. If you go to this design tab, this is where you can choose a different background if you didn't choose one already. Notice that it changes the text as well. It changes everything on the slide to make it look decent. Because you and I aren't graphic designers, Microsoft built in a lot of things that already have color schemes with them that match and that are nice. So think about that as you choose what you want your slides to look like, but also make sure that it makes sense. I'm just going to choose this one for the time being. I just want to show you can also choose different variants on the color scheme. So depending on what you like, there's options for you at the top. Microsoft PowerPoint basically works that way. It has some main things that you need to know how to do, and then the optional things are usually located in the same places. So that's how you may use Microsoft PowerPoint. Now I'm going to open a presentation that I already made to show you what a finished presentation might look like. This was a presentation that I made for my high school students. In my presentations, I always had a box and a line across the top because I would record myself speaking over the PowerPoint. So this is where the video of me would go. But this is a presentation I made on the kinetic theory of matter for high school students. I just want to show you a few things in my presentation. So I used custom animation to make things come in at different times as I spoke. So I would explain about what the kinetic theory of matter was and how it applies to solids. Then I would talk a little bit more about it as things pop in, and I tried to make it as visually appealing as possible. I made my own custom background that had something to do with what I was talking about. But then I would explain everything. I would have a few key phrases pop in that students need to know. And this is all the text I'm going to put on this slide. There's 2 key terms, and then I explain those terms a little bit down below. With the kinetic theory of matter, I was really trying to explain to students how the atoms of different substances behave. That's not something high school students in their freshman year had thought of a whole lot before. So I had to help them to visualize it. And the way that I did that was by adding some images. So here are 3 different kinds of solids that are kind of different from one another. This is what the particles of a solid do. And I just want to stop and point something out at this point. Do you notice that everything in this slide lines up with something else for the most part? Notice that this edge of this box lines up with this edge of this box. The bottom of this box lines up with the bottoms of these 2 pictures. Over here I lined up this with this. You want to try your best to make things in your slide line up with something, because that gives the slide consistency and makes it look good. Also notice there's not a lot of empty space between things. If I was going to criticize this slide at all, I would say there's a lot of empty space right here. Maybe it would have looked good if there was something there. I don't know. I don't think it would have. But just so you know, you want to try to fill the space and make things line up in the space. Then I would go on to explain how real world objects sort of behave. So this is a galvanized steel washer, like is pictured right here. This is what the atoms of it look like. So there's an outer coating of metal atoms, and underneath is an alloy that has metal atoms with other things mixed in. And I would talk about how those atoms are bonded together so they can just vibrate in a fixed place. Notice that I used shapes in Microsoft PowerPoint. These are all shapes that I added to make a point more clear for my students. And I had things pop in at different times, and I even have things leave a specific way. Now this was in a series of presentations where I presented about solids, liquids, and gases, and I just want to show you what the other one looked like. I'll show you the liquids one as well, just because I want to show you something else that's a good design feature. You want to be consistent. If I make 2 presentations about the same topic, things better pop in the exact same way as they did previously, because that's what makes it look good. That consistency is very, very important. So I had things pop in the same way, explain things in parallel, and notice that I have things go out the same basic way they came in. If I had a fly in transition, I have a fly out transition. If I had a fade in transition, I have a fade out transition. So just make sure you're thinking about how you're going to make this meaningful, how you're going to make it consistent, how are you going to make this a well-designed PowerPoint presentation. The other thing I didn't show you is where you can add notes to your presentation. I just want to make sure you see that so you know where that can be added. If you go to View and then you go to Outline View, notice that down below your slide you have a place to add notes about your presentation. You can also click and drag. If things are ridiculously far over, you can click and drag and move things over. But this is where you would add additional information, where you explain this presentation is about, and then you would enter what it's about, and my audience is. Okay, so make sure that you have at least a few sentences on each slide. The first slide should tell me what your presentation is about, who your audience is. Remember, this is a complicated thing, takes a lot of thinking beforehand, thinking as you're doing it, technique, skill. Put as much work as you can into this to make it look as good as possible, but also feel free to ask questions if you have them.